is your WNBA Eastern Conference Player of the Week for the third time this season. Now, I believe injury has kept her from receiving 2 of those awards. Otherwise, it could be more than just these 3 times. Caitlin Clark this past week, 25.7 points per game, 53.7% from the field, 9 assists per game, and
26 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists. A triple-double against the Portland Fire that had the entire arena on its feet and the entire internet losing its mind. That wasn't just another Friday night for Caitlin Clark. It was a statement, a declaration, a flare shot into the sky that said, "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, and you're going to have to deal with me." Because right now, as we sit here in August of 2026, the WNBA MVP race has officially become a 2-woman collision course, and one of those women just spent the last month playing basketball that belongs in a time capsule. But here's the thing nobody wants to talk about. This race isn't just about who puts up the prettier stat line. It's tangled up in injuries, coaching controversies, locker room side eyes, a betting scandal that embarrassed an entire league, off-court rallies that have nothing to do with basketball, and a question that might matter more than any number on a box score. Where does Indiana finish? Because that answer could decide everything. And if you think this is just another MVP debate, you haven't been paying attention to what's been happening behind the scenes. Let's rewind to May, because the Caitlin Clark you're watching right now, the one dropping triple-doubles and climbing MVP ladders, that version almost didn't exist this season. Opening night against the Dallas Wings, Clark played 30 minutes and looked like herself in flashes, but she kept disappearing to the locker room, once, twice, multiple times during the game. After the final buzzer, the truth came out. Her back was getting out of alignment, and she needed in-game adjustments just to stay on the court. Coach Stephanie White tried to keep things calm, calling it an ongoing thing, saying they wouldn't have played her 30 minutes if she wasn't okay. But that word, ongoing, hung in the air like a warning sign. This wasn't a one-night issue. This was a body that had been through the ringer during a 2025 season cut short by injuries, and it was already telling her that 2026 wouldn't be a smooth ride either. Then came Portland, not the triple-double Portland, the other one. Clark didn't play, sat out entirely. The Fever initially called it a strategic management plan, which is corporate speak for load management. The WNBA didn't appreciate the vagueness and issued an official warning to Indiana for how they handled her injury designation. The league basically said you can't just scratch your biggest star 2 hours before tip-off without putting her on the injury report. It was an awkward moment, the Fever trying to protect their franchise player, the league trying to protect its product, and Clark stuck in the middle of a tug-of-war she didn't ask for. But the real nightmare came on June 25th against Phoenix. That game had everything wrong with it. Clark was driving to the basket in the second quarter when Mercury forward Alyssa Thomas brought her hand down and pressed her fist directly into Clark's throat. No foul was called on the floor. Later in the game, Clark got undercut on not 1 but 2 three-point attempts. She left the court in the third quarter with a back injury, and Indiana lost 111 to 109 in a game that felt like it was stolen in daylight robbery. Stephanie White was furious afterward. She called the plays egregious and absolutely unacceptable, pleading with the league to protect what she called a generational talent and a WNBA superstar. The next day, the WNBA retroactively upgraded the Thomas foul to a flagrant 2 and handed her a 1-game suspension. Too little, too late for Clark, who was now sidelined with a back injury that had no clear timeline for return. She missed multiple games. When she finally came back on July 9th, she was on a minutes restriction and looked nothing like herself. The rust was visible, the rhythm was off, the timing between her and her teammates felt disjointed, and she publicly called out the Fever's short substitution patterns for disrupting her flow. It was the lowest point of her season. Her MVP odds cratered, analysts moved on, the conversation shifted to A'ja Wilson, Paige Bueckers, and Olivia Miles. Clark was yesterday's news. And then something changed, something clicked. Starting around mid-July, Clark began stringing together performances that didn't just remind people she was good, they forced the entire league to recalibrate. Over her last 5 games heading into the All-Star break, she averaged 29.4 points and 9 assists. She hit the triple-double against Portland. She torched Seattle for 32 points and 7 assists in her first game after the break. She wasn't just back, she was better. And suddenly, the MVP conversation that everyone thought was settled had a brand new chapter.
The responses, folks, this is a 2 in a row. 2 Player of the Weeks in a row for Caitlin Clark. Pacers, WNBA, some fan reaction as well. Take a look at Stephanie White.
We got an Eastern Conference Player of the Week.
Yeah, fix those shorts, dude. She said fix those shorts, man. Fix those shorts.
Now, before anyone starts building Clark's MVP trophy, let's talk about the woman standing at the top of that mountain. Because A'ja Wilson hasn't just been good this season, she's been otherworldly. We're talking about 26.1 points per game, nearly 10 rebounds, 2 blocks a night, a shooting percentage above 53% from the field, and she's doing all of this while leading the league in scoring and blocks, sitting third in rebounds, and anchoring a Las Vegas defense that has opponents second-guessing every shot within 15 feet of the basket. Wilson has now won the MVP award 4 times. 4! That's a record. And the scary part is she might be playing even more efficiently than she did during her historic 2024 campaign. In her last 6 regular season appearances, she shot 70% or better from the field in 4 of them. Let that sink in. 70%. That's not basketball, that's target practice with a blindfold on and still not missing. The Aces are sitting at 18-9 and competing near the top of the Western Conference standings. Wilson's advanced metrics, win shares, box plus minus, player impact estimate are all at or near the top of the league. She's not just the best player on a good team, she's the gravitational center of a championship-caliber roster, and everything the Aces do offensively and defensively orbits around her presence. You take Wilson off that roster, and the Aces become a completely different team. That's not speculation, that's observable reality. And here's the part that Clark supporters need to sit with, even if it stings a little. If the season ended today, Wilson would probably win MVP. And it wouldn't be because of bias, it wouldn't be because of politics, it would be because she earned it. Her production on both ends of the floor, combined with the Aces' standing in the league, creates a case that is extremely difficult to argue against. That's the mountain Clark is trying to climb, not a hill, a mountain. So if Wilson is that dominant, what exactly is Clark's argument? This is where the conversation gets fascinating, because these 2 players aren't just competing for the same award, they represent 2 completely different philosophies of basketball value. Wilson controls space. When she's on the floor, the area around the basket belongs to her. She can score from the post, the mid-range, and increasingly from 3. She grabs rebounds over taller defenders, she erases mistakes at the rim. She punishes teams who try to test her inside and makes opponents think twice before entering the paint. Her dominance is physical, visible, and impossible to game plan around, because even when you know it's coming, you still can't stop it. Clark controls decisions. When she has the basketball, every defender on the floor has to make a choice, and most of those choices are wrong. She can pull up from 30 feet and make it look casual. She can thread a pass through traffic that turns a stagnant possession into an easy layup for a teammate. She can push the tempo in transition and create a 4-on-3 before the defense even realizes the play is started. She's currently 2nd in the league in assists at 7.9 per game, 4th in scoring at 21, and first in points created per minute. That last stat is the one that deserves a second look, because points created doesn't just measure what Clark scores, it measures the total offensive output she's personally responsible for generating. When she scores 25 and assists on another 20, her fingerprints are nearly half of Indiana's offense before you even factor in hockey assists, transition pressure, and the defensive attention she absorbs just by standing on the court. This is the philosophical divide that makes the MVP race so compelling. Is the most valuable player the one who provides the strongest total package on both ends of the floor? Or is it the one whose team would collapse most dramatically without her?
Is it the best performer on one of the league's top teams? Or is it the engine who transforms an offense every single possession she touches the ball? There's no neutral formula for answering that question. Every voter brings their own priorities. One prioritizes team record, another prioritizes efficiency, another emphasizes defense, another focuses on workload and creation. And because there's no consensus on what most valuable actually means, both Wilson and Clark can make legitimate cases that the other can't fully refute. Wilson can say, "I do everything on both ends." Clark can say, "I generate more total offense than anyone in the league," and they'd both be right. That's what makes this race feel different from a typical MVP conversation. It's not about one player being clearly better, it's about which definition of value the voters choose to apply.
Now, here's where the conversation shifts from the league-wide debate to something much more specific and much more uncomfortable. Because Caitlin Clark's MVP case doesn't just depend on what she does, it depends on what Indiana allows her to do. And right now, there's a real, ongoing tension about how the Fever use their most dangerous weapon. Fans have started calling it Clark ball versus everything else. When Clark controls the offense, pushing the pace, making early reads, attacking before the defense is set, Indiana looks like a completely different team. The ball moves faster, the spacing opens up, defenders are scrambling to rotate before Clark hits a cutter with a pass they didn't see coming. But there are stretches in games where the system shifts. The ball goes to Aaliyah Boston at the high post, the tempo slows down, and Clark drifts to the perimeter as a spacer. Boston is a skilled passer for a post player, and there are legitimate basketball reasons to use her as a facilitator. She can punish certain matchups, operate from the elbow, and create cutting lanes. But here's the problem. When Clark becomes a spectator, the defense gets relief. They no longer have to worry about her attacking downhill, reading two defenders at once, or firing a pass before the rotation is ready. The Fever can still score, but the pressure changes, the unpredictability disappears, and Indiana's offense starts to look like every other team in the league instead of the most dynamic attack in the WNBA. Think of it this way. Using Clark primarily as a spacer is like buying a sports car capable of 200 miles per hour and refusing to take it out of first gear. You'll still get where you're going, but you're wasting the thing that makes the car special. This coaching debate matters in the MVP race for a very specific reason. Caitlin Clark's box score directly reflects how often she's empowered to create. If she spends long stretches away from the ball, her assist opportunities shrink, her rhythm changes, the pace slows, and then critics can point to her lower totals without acknowledging that the system produced those numbers, not her ability. It's a trap. When Clark creates, her stats look historic. When the system restricts her, her stats look merely good. And merely good doesn't win MVP awards, not when your competition is putting up 26 and 10 on 53% shooting while protecting the rim like a human wall. The goal shouldn't be choosing between Clark and Boston. It should be building an offense where the defense has no good answer for both of them. Boston screens, rolls, seals, finishes, and facilitates. Mitchell attacks gaps and punishes switches. Clark organizes the entire sequence and finds wherever the defense is weakest. When those roles connect, Indiana is terrifying. When they compete for possession-by-possession control, the offense loses its identity, and Clark's MVP case loses its strongest evidence. The Fever have a decision to make, and that decision will shape more than just an award. It'll determine their playoff ceiling. Remember that clip that went viral a few weeks ago? Caitlin Clark wins her third Eastern Conference Player of the Week award, second in a row, and the camera catches the locker room celebration. Stephanie White is grinning, teammates are clapping, the energy feels genuine. But the internet didn't focus on the celebration. It focused on one face, Brianne January's, an assistant coach whose expression, for maybe 2 or 3 seconds, didn't look as enthusiastic as everyone else in the room. That was enough. Fans screenshot it, they clipped it, they dissected it frame by frame, and decided that January was unhappy about Clark's success, that she secretly wanted the award to go to Kelsey Mitchell, that the coaching staff was divided on who should be Indiana's centerpiece. The original podcast even joked about it, imagining January thinking, "How do I get it to be Kelsey next week?" Now, let's be clear about something. That is interpretation. It's not verified evidence of resentment. Nobody can responsibly determine what a person is thinking from a few seconds of video. There could be a dozen explanations. She might have been tired, distracted, thinking about the next game plan, or just caught at an awkward angle. Treating a facial expression as proof of a locker room conspiracy is the kind of overreaction that turns a basketball conversation into a soap opera.
But here's why it resonated. Clark supporters have a frustration that runs deeper than any single clip. They've watched games where Clark initiates the offense and immediately creates an advantage, then watched other stretches where she's moved away from the ball while the attack becomes slower and more predictable. So when they see even a harmless expression that could be interpreted as less than excited, they connect it to a larger grievance they already carry. The frustration isn't really about applause, it's about control. It's about whether Indiana is truly committed to building around Clark's strengths or whether internal politics will hold her back. And then there's the Kelsey Mitchell question. Mitchell is having a phenomenal season. During one stretch, she averaged 31 points per game, higher than Clark's 25.7. She's the team's leading scorer. Her speed, shot-making, and willingness to attack prevent defenses from loading every resource toward Clark. There are nights when Mitchell single-handedly carries stretches of the offense and punishes teams for overcommitting to stop Clark. But an MVP case demands more than asking whether a player is excellent. It asks whether that player shapes more dimensions of the game than every other candidate. Mitchell can win a scoring matchup on a given night, but Clark may still influence more total possessions because she's also directing teammates, pulling down rebounds, and controlling tempo. When you put their Player of the Week numbers side by side, Clark at 25.7, 9 assists, 5 rebounds on 53% shooting, Mitchell at 31 points with 2.3 assists, the distinction becomes clear. Mitchell had the scoring edge. Clark carried the broader workload. And here's the part that gets overlooked. Clark's MVP case actually gets stronger when Mitchell plays well because Indiana wins more games. The two aren't in competition with each other. They're in collaboration. The tension comes from usage. How does Indiana maintain Mitchell's scoring rhythm without removing Clark from the role that makes the offense most dynamic? That's a coaching puzzle, not a reason to force the players into a personal rivalry. While Clark has been climbing the MVP ladder, two of her biggest competitors have been dealing with their own problems, and one of those problems is genuinely embarrassing. During the 2026 All-Star Weekend, Paige Bueckers and Angel Reese were goofing around at practice. Cameras were rolling. Reese held up $400 and joked about a bet they were making on their upcoming game, the Dallas Wings versus the Atlanta Dream. Bueckers played along, saying, "This is how the rich stay rich." It seemed harmless, just two stars having fun. Then the WNBA's social media team did something incredibly stupid. They actually posted the video on the league's official account before the game. The internet reacted exactly how you'd expect, because Section 5C of the new CBA explicitly prohibits any player from wagering money or anything of value on the outcome of any WNBA competition. The penalty can include fines, suspension, or even permanent dismissal from the league. The WNBA scrambled to delete the post, then released a statement saying the video was intended to be lighthearted but missed the mark. That's corporate damage control at its finest. We meant it as a joke, but also we deleted the evidence as fast as humanly possible. Now, was Paige Bueckers going to get banned over a $400 friendly wager? Of course not, but the optics were brutal. In a sports landscape where betting scandals have decimated careers and entire programs, from college basketball to Major League Baseball to the NFL, the last thing any MVP candidate needs is their name attached to the word wager in a league investigation. The WNBA confirmed that neither Beckers nor Reese would face punishment, but the damage to Beckers' MVP narrative was real. She dropped in the odds, Clark jumped her, and the conversation shifted. Then there's Olivia Miles. The Minnesota Lynx rookie has been sensational, averaging 19.7 points and 5.8 assists while leading the best team in the league. She's the heavy favorite for Rookie of the Year, and her numbers are eerily similar to what Clark put up during her own rookie campaign in 2024. Olivia is a legitimate MVP candidate, especially since the Lynx are sitting at the top of the standings. But when you zoom in on the recent head-to-head comparison, Clark has the edge. Over a 5-game stretch, Clark posted 121 points and 45 assists, compared to Miles' 113 points and 28 assists. The efficiency gap was even wider, 1.78 points per shot for Clark versus 1.33 for Miles. 5 games don't erase an entire season, and Miles doesn't need to fail for Clark's case to succeed. But when people make the specific claim that one player has overtaken another, the recent production becomes relevant. And right now, Clark's production is speaking louder.
Here's the stat that nobody puts on a graphic, but might matter more than any scoring title or assist record: the Indiana spot in the standings. The Fever were currently 19-10, sitting first in the Eastern Conference. They have the #1 offensive rating in the entire league at 117.7. Their net rating sits third. This is not the Fever of 2022, when they won 5 games and the franchise felt like it was disappearing. This is not even the Fever of 2024, when Clark dragged them to .500 and a first-round playoff exit. This is a team that is genuinely competing for a top seed, and that matters more than any individual stat line when it comes to MVP voting. Here's why. Team success acts like a credibility multiplier. The same 25-9 season feels more powerful when it comes from a team competing for the best record than when it comes from a middle seed. Voters see winning as evidence that individual production is translating into championship-level impact. If Indiana finishes as a top 3 seed league-wide, voters lose their easiest reason to keep Clark behind Wilson. If Indiana stays inconsistent, Wilson's combination of production and team success becomes the safer, more conventional choice. So every single Fever game from now until the end of the season carries double weight. A win strengthens Clark's individual case. A loss invites the response that her numbers are brilliant, but the team hasn't climbed high enough. But there's another layer to this, and it has absolutely nothing to do with basketball. Since late July, the Indiana Fever have been playing their road games in the middle of a circus that nobody on the roster asked for. It started when an ESPN feature quoted Sophie Cunningham, Clark's teammate, voicing her opposition to transgender women competing in women's sports. Cunningham said she wanted to protect young girls in a locker room and young girls in sports who shouldn't have to go against biological men. The quote ignited a firestorm. Rallies started appearing outside arenas before Fever road games. Pro-Cunningham demonstrations in Seattle, another in Portland, another in Minnesota, a 5th one planned in Chicago, a 6th already scheduled for New York later this month. Then the situation escalated further. During the Fever's game in Seattle, 2 fans said they were confronted in the stands by Storm co-owner Celeste Keaton over signs supporting Cunningham. The fans alleged Keaton called them effing insane during a heated exchange. The Storm later apologized for the incident. Cunningham told reporters she wasn't concerned about being a distraction. The Fever issued a statement distancing the organization from the rallies, saying the team had no knowledge of or contact with the organizers. After the game, the team kept both Cunningham and Clark away from the media. This is the environment Clark is performing in right now.
Every road game comes with a sideshow. Every press conference has questions that have nothing to do with pick and rolls or assist-to-turnover ratios. Every arena has a charged atmosphere where basketball is competing with politics for attention. And through all of it, Clark has to step on the court and produce at a level that forces MVP voters to pay attention. The fact that she's averaging nearly 30 points and 9 assists during this stretch isn't just impressive from a basketball standpoint, it's impressive from a mental toughness standpoint. She's performing at an elite level while the world around her team is getting louder and more chaotic by the week. So where does this all land? Here's the honest truth about the Caitlin Clark MVP campaign. She doesn't need A'ja Wilson to decline. She doesn't need Wilson to get injured, slump, or have the aces fall apart. What she needs is to become so offensively overwhelming, so statistically undeniable, and so closely tied to Indiana's winning that voters are forced to compare two equally incredible cases and make an impossible choice.
One spectacular stretch opened the door. 3 Eastern Conference Player of the Week awards, consecutive weekly honors, elite scoring efficiency, league-leading creation metrics, a triple-double that had the entire basketball world talking. These are not the profile of a player living on hype. These are not the numbers of someone coasting on popularity or television ratings. This is the profile of a genuine MVP contender who has earned her place in the conversation through production that nobody can reasonably dismiss. But here's what has to happen next. Clark needs sustained efficiency, not one hot week, a hot month, then another one. She needs elite playmaking numbers that stay consistent, even when Indiana's system doesn't always maximize her. She needs fewer costly turnovers because Wilson supporters will use every single one as evidence that Clark isn't polished enough for the award. And most importantly, Indiana needs to keep winning. The standings argument has to disappear. If the Fever finish as a top 3 seed, the conversation becomes purely about basketball merit, and that's a debate Clark can win. If they slip to a middle seed, Wilson's case becomes the safer choice, and no amount of highlight reel passes or 30-point games will overcome the narrative gap. The Fever themselves have a choice to make. Are they a team that occasionally allows Clark to take control when circumstances demand it, or are they prepared to build a consistent identity around the advantages she creates? That choice will influence far more than an MVP trophy. It'll shape their playoff ceiling, their long-term identity, and the legacy of a franchise that hasn't won a championship since 2012. Wilson isn't slowing down. She's producing historic numbers of her own and offering an impact on both ends of the floor that Clark can't perfectly replicate. That's what makes this race so compelling. It's not a popularity contest between two famous athletes. It's a clash between two fundamentally different forms of basketball greatness. Wilson controls the paint. Clark controls the game. Wilson dominates through physical presence. Clark dominates through creative vision. Wilson's case says nobody does more on both ends. Clark's case says nobody generates more total offense while facing more defensive attention. So here's the question, and there's no easy answer. If the season ends with Wilson leading the stronger team while dominating as a scorer, rebounder, and defender, does she deserve the MVP? Or does Clark's total offensive creation, the points, the assists, the efficiency, the gravity, the unmeasurable impact of forcing every opponent to build their entire game plan around stopping one person, make her more valuable? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me what should matter most in MVP voting, because this race is far from over, and the next chapter might be the most dramatic one yet. Like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.